I've been sitting with something lately, and it's that I've always told myself this story that I'm inconsistent, that I struggle with discipline, that I start things and don't always finish them, especially when it comes to business. But when I actually like slow down and look back, especially at the last year, I realized something. I don't think that story that I've been telling myself is completely true. You see, over the past year, I picked up running. No big goal at first, just one run a week. And that turned into two runs a week after week for an entire year. I've shown up consistently for my kids, their swimming lessons, their sports, just being there. I've kept this podcast alive even when consistency didn't look perfect. And when I looked at all of that together, it hit me. Maybe I wasn't inconsistent at all. So this episode, right? This episode is for the man, the father who's been hard on himself. It's for you if you've tied your sense of discipline or worth too closely to your business results. And in doing so, might be overlooking the ways you've actually been showing up all along. So, what I plan to do in this episode is to walk you through a few realizations I've had over the past year. Realizations about discipline, about frustration tolerance, about identity, about how I misunderstood myself for a very long time. And I want to share this because maybe in my story, you'll start to notice patterns in your own life. And maybe, just maybe, hearing my story can help you see things a little differently. And just in case you're new here, this is the Body of Work podcast. My name is Andy. I'm a father, a husband, someone who is constantly working on becoming a more grounded, present, and comprehensive man. And, build something in the process that's meaningful. So this podcast isn't me, speaking from the finish line, but it's me actually documenting the work real time from the middle as I figure it out. And so for a long time, I thought I was inconsistent, like I mentioned, right? And the reason this realization hit me the way it did, like it really rocked me on a core identity level, is because for years, I've believed this story about myself. This story that I struggle with consistency, especially when it comes to business. You see, I've been working on building different businesses for the better part of, I'd say, maybe 10 years now. Starting off from side hustles and side projects here and there. And the story I kept telling myself was always the same. I'd start something super excited, full of energy, and then when it got hard or boring or complex or unclear, I'd fall off. And if I'm being honest, that story is something I've used against myself for a very long time. Because when something didn't work out the way I hoped, or it didn't move fast enough, or I didn't make the money, or like, or it didn't turn into something tangible, I didn't just say, okay, this thing didn't work. No, I went a step further and I made it mean something about me. Like, see, another business attempt failed. This is just who you are, Andy. You're inconsistent. You have no follow through. And the crazy part is that belief didn't just stay in business. The effects of it bled into how I saw myself as a man, right? As a father, how I saw myself as a husband. And it really rocked me, like I said, like on a core level, especially as someone who wants to lead and follow through on things that he commits to. So for a very long time, I was looking at myself, my identity, who I thought I was, through this through this very narrow lens. Like, did this business work? Did it make money? Did it turn into something tangible? And if the answer was no, then in my mind, the problem was me. And for the record, right, this isn't me, saying that I don't take responsibility if something failed or, for my failures in business. Or, like I'm trying to pass the blame. Like, that's not the case because I'm not the type to not take responsibility or try to pass off the blame. But what I didn't realize back then was that I was only measuring consistency in one very, small, narrow area of my life. And then I'm pulling that conclusion through everything else. And in doing that, I completely ignored all the ways I was actually showing up. And the moment that really cracked this belief open for me, like really cracked it open, was running. And this is something I only really realized this year, granted we're just a few weeks in, because at the beginning of last year, I picked up running with no real goal in mind, like I said. I didn't set out to run races. I didn't really have a plan. I remember all I told myself was, I just want to get back in shape. I want to build my conditioning again. Because I used to play a lot of basketball over the years, something I was actually, very consistent in, but I also, again, failed to see and acknowledge the consistency in that. But then life changed. I moved further away from, the city I was in where I was playing ball. Family life became more of a priority, and basketball just wasn't something I could do consistently anymore, especially with the hours it would take to train and commit to a team. And running, on the other hand, like that felt simple enough to do. Even though I wasn't a big fan of it, it was something I could fit into my life more easily, put on my shoes, step aside, and just go. So I told myself I'm going to run once a week, 5 kilometers, like that's it. No pressure, no big identity attached to it. And that's exactly what I did. I ran once a week for a few months. And then at some point, I decided, okay, you know what? Let me sign up for a race. So I signed up for a 10K race, almost as a way to also shake free of this other belief that I had about myself that I wasn't a long distance runner. So I ran, one race, and then I found myself signing up for another one. And that's when I shifted from running once a week to running twice a week, because it was something that still felt feasible. Like it still felt realistic, because now the inner athlete in me was awakened. And I wanted to see if with intentional training, like this time I could, improve my second race compared to my first race. And so I just kept going week after week. I kept it moving on the days I felt good. I kept it moving on the days I felt tired, on dark, cold mornings. On days my body felt like stiff and sore, I just showed up. And I'll be honest, having those races planned, like having actually like paid to like run in those races, like they definitely helped me, because having something to work toward definitely played a role in, having no choice but to stay disciplined and to stay consistent. But before I knew it, a year had passed, and I went from barely running 5 kilometers to running 10-kilometer races, to running 12 kilometers, the longest distance I've run so far, to signing up a couple of weeks ago for my first half marathon, something I never thought I'd do, especially as someone who, again, never saw himself as a long distance runner. And when I actually stopped and looked at that, it was all of a sudden clear, right? I wasn't inconsistent. I was pretty damn disciplined, actually. And then all of a sudden, that realization I had, it didn't just stop with running. It made me think about my kettlebell training, something I picked up like, 3 years ago, and I'm still doing to this day. It made me think about coaching my son's soccer team, something I started 6 months ago, even though I felt insecure about it. And I told myself I wasn't, structured enough to do it. And here I am 6 months later, still coaching, still showing up for his team. And not only that, the soccer club is actually, pretty happy with me. And it made me think about my kids, right? Their swimming lessons, 2 years straight, week after week, showing up so they could learn a valuable life skill, especially, because we live here in the Netherlands. And it made me think about this podcast as well. Like I started this podcast 2 years ago, which is still crazy to think about. And even though it's been imperfect, even though there have been breaks, like I'm still here and I've stuck with it. And that's when it really clicked. I wasn't inconsistent. I was disciplined, just quietly. I wasn't making a big deal out of it. I wasn't posting about it every time. I wasn't just showing up in the best. I was just basically showing up in the best way that I could. And I realized that I had been overlooking all of this clear proof of consistency in my life simply because it wasn't happening in my business. And once that realization landed, once I could finally see all these places where I was showing up, it basically forced me to ask a different question. If I'm capable of this level of discipline, right? then what was really going on when, where business is concerned? And to be fair, this is something I'm still kind of like sitting with, something I'm still exploring. But what I've come to see and what I've come to notice is that it wasn't a lack of discipline that kept, tripping me up. It was my relationship with frustration, my relationship with being bored, with things taking longer than I wanted them to. For a long time, I took the feelings of discomfort as a signal. Like, if something felt heavy or if it felt repetitive or even if it felt unclear or slow, I took that as a sign that something was wrong, something was up. Like maybe I wasn't aligned anymore. Maybe the passion was gone. Maybe this is the moment that I pivot, right? And I told myself that story often enough that it started to feel true. But running, right? Picking up running, it quietly challenged that thought process because you see, when you're running is super uncomfortable. Like a lot of the time, like most of the time, it's repetitive, it's boring. There are long stretches where nothing exciting happens at all. And yet, that's exactly where the progress lives. No one's cheering you on during a random Tuesday run. There's no feedback loop telling you you're doing great. You just keep going. And that's when it clicked for me. Frustration tolerance, essentially your ability to keep doing the activity you need to do even when it gets boring or hard or repetitive or frustrating. Like frustration tolerance, it isn't something you either have or you don't have. I learned that it's a skill, which means you can actually develop it. And I hadn't built it consciously in business, but I had been building it in my body. You see, running taught me how to stay present inside discomfort without immediately needing to escape it, without needing it to feel meaningful right away, to just delay gratification, without needing, constant or instant validation from anyone. And once I saw that, I stopped looking at my past as a series of failures. I started seeing it as training, not training for speed, but to this day, it's basically training for like staying power. And once I started seeing all of this more clearly, once I could just like really zoom out a bit, something shifted for me. Like I stopped trying to define myself by outcomes alone. I stopped measuring my worth purely by productivity or progress or whether something worked in a way that I thought it should. I had to shift from being so focused on being a human, like doing, and just remember that I'm also a human being. And because of that, I started asking myself a different question. I started to ask, who am I becoming through the way that I show up? Because when I look at my life now and not just business, but all of it together, I see a man who shows up not perfectly, not loudly, but consistently. And this isn't about me, trying to toot my own horn. No, it's about recognizing who you are. For me, that also means seeing myself as a father who allows his kids to feel what they feel, a father who makes it his business to take their emotions seriously, understanding that if something is important to them in their small world, then it shouldn't be dismissed as a small problem. If they experience it as something big, then it deserves to be like, this huge thing for me. I also see myself as a husband who's learning slowly and imperfectly to be less defensive, to listen more, to validate feelings instead of trying to fix everything right away. Learning that sometimes presence matters more than solutions. And I see a man who's learning to hold strength and softness at the same time. To understand that being disciplined doesn't mean only being rigid, and being gentle doesn't mean you're weak. What I'm realizing more and more is that becoming a comprehensive man, a more complete man, is someone grounded, someone who is emotionally aware and steady. It isn't about eliminating fear, frustration, or doubts, but about learning how to stay with those feelings, to embrace them, but not just stop there, but to go a layer deeper and understand them, especially when it comes to anger or irritation, asking, what's actually underneath this anger or irritation? and then responding intentionally instead of reacting automatically. And maybe the biggest shift for me has been this: I started giving myself more credit, not in an ego driven way, not putting my head in the clouds, but in an honest way, like acknowledging that like I have built skills over the years, that I have grown, that I have expanded as a person, and that slowing down, actually enjoying the process, even the not so glamorous parts, isn't me falling behind. It's me finally being present in my own life, because I'm not just becoming a better man for myself, even though the work starts there with me, but I'm becoming a better father for my kids, a better husband and partner for my wife. And I say partner especially because that word reminds me we're a team, we're in this together. But I'm also becoming a better leader for the people I'm connected to and the people I will connect with in the future. And for the first time in a long time, I can say this with real conviction: I'm not inconsistent. I am disciplined. I just have to learn how to see it and stop defining myself and my whole identity by one small piece of the pie. And I guess the reason, like, I want to share all of this, it isn't to convince you of anything. It's not to tell you what to do. It's simply to offer a different way of looking at yourself. Because maybe you're not as inconsistent as you've been telling yourself you are. Maybe you've just been measuring yourself in the wrong places, or in one small place, and then, letting that become your entire identity. Maybe there are areas in your life where you have been showing up, but you've been showing up quietly, without big time recognition, without validation, without giving yourself any credit. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth slowing down long enough to actually see that. To also see that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect system. To see that you don't need to be loud about your progress for it to, count, but that you are allowed to acknowledge your growth. You are allowed to give yourself credit. And you're allowed to just to be a human being at your own pace. And if nothing else, I hope this episode gives you permission to look at your own life with a little more honesty, a little bit more compassion, right? Because the work that you're doing, even in listening to this, even when no one's watching, like that work, it still counts. And that's what I like to call the body of work that you're putting out into the world.